The Green Bay Packers have started off their season 2-0 with huge victories versus the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions. Because of this, the hype is bigger than ever before. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Green Bay Packers and why I believe this Green Bay Packers team has a chance to go all the way to the Super Bowl. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So last night, we got to watch the Green Bay Packers face off against the Washington Commanders. It was a great environment, wide out for the Green Bay Packers, and they pretty much dominated the game. The final score was 27-18, but they held the Washington Commanders to 3 total points through the first 3 quarters of the game. The Commanders did make it somewhat more interesting in the fourth quarter. They scored 15 points, but the Packers had a response, and that basically was the game. And we also cannot forget that they absolutely obliterated the Green Bay Packers in week 1, 27-13. So in both their 2 games to start the season off, they have had 2 big-time victories versus 2 very good NFC teams. 2 NFC teams that heading into the season, we all thought were going to make the playoffs. The Detroit Lions, for all the issues they might have on the roster because of the new coaching staff and some pieces missing from last year, we all still thought that Lions team was at the bare minimum a contender to win their division. And for the Washington Commanders, obviously that team last year made it to the NFC Championship game, and the expectations were higher because of a very aggressive offseason from Washington. And in both games, not only did Green Bay win, but they decisively won. They handled their business in both games, and by the second half, the game really wasn't in question. Now, I want to make sure we get something very clear. It's only week 2 of the NFL season. Let's not forget what happened last year to the New Orleans Saints, who started the year off 2-0 and would end up drafting like a top 5 pick by the season end. So keep that in mind when we talk about this Green Bay Packers team, but I think there's a clear difference between this Packers team and that New Orleans Saints team. That Saints team last year that had 2 very good starts to their season went up against the Carolina Panthers and the Dallas Cowboys. Both of those teams were not very good last year, especially on defense. This Packers team, however, is going up against some very legitimate quarterbacks and offenses in Detroit and the Washington Commanders, and they've handled business in both their games. But what makes me believe this team can win a Super Bowl after just 2 weeks? Well, it isn't the fact that the offense is just that damn incredible. It's really having to do with how good this defense looks. This Packers team has always sort of felt like they were close, but not quite there. They had the quarterback, they had some pieces offensively, they had some guys defensively that make you feel really good, but they were missing something, and it really was hard to pinpoint exactly what that was. But then they make some very aggressive moves on the offensive line to make that offensive line one of the best units out there, when healthy, of course. You add a Matthew Golden to the receiving core, which we'll talk about that receiving core here in just a bit, but you add him to the offense. Last year, you brought in Josh Jacobs as well. And then on the defensive side of things, you've been pretty aggressive there too. Obviously, bringing in Xavier McKinney last year was a huge deal. Drafting Evan Williams was a big deal too. Getting rid of Jair Alexander, which low-key is looking pretty smart right now. And then, of course, the big-time trade of one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL that has revolutionized this defense, Micah Parsons. This aggressive mindset the past 2 years has really made this team a formidable roster. Let's not forget in 2023 when they made that deep playoff run, that was a good team, but it was clearly a kind of limited team. I don't think anyone thought that team was going to make it to a Super Bowl. And they could have probably just stood pat with that roster, felt happy about their success from that year, and then went into 2024, maybe making some small upgrades here and there, but generally bringing back the same team. This Packers team said, nah, screw that. We have this super young quarterback who we're going to go ahead and pay, and we're going to surround this guy with as much talent as physically possible. And over the course of the last 2 years, they have checked that box off very, very well. This Packers team is great personnel-wise on both sides, and they also have an excellent head coach to pair along with some great offensive and defensive coordinators. In general, I look at this Packers roster and I see really no flaws. Let's focus in on the offensive side of things here, because in both games, they have managed to score 27 points, and they've done so in a way that I did not quite expect. You see, heading into the season, I was a big proponent of Matthew Golden being the reason for why this offense opens up. I was under the belief that Matthew Golden would serve as a safety blanket. Well, through 2 weeks of the NFL season, he has a total of 2 catches for 16 yards. Now, I will say this, I do believe in the future he will get a lot more work, both this year, next year, and years beyond. But so far, to start off the season, they have not been winning these games because of Matthew Golden. They've been winning these games because of a bunch of other guys too. Let's start off with the obvious one. Josh Jacobs, 42 carries for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns so far this year. And then in the receiving core, again, it's always sort of been like which guy is going to step up. And I don't necessarily think that anybody has stepped up fully yet. Romeo Doubs has had a decent start to his season. 5 catches for 96 yards and 1 touchdown. Jaden Reed, who unfortunately went down with a broken collarbone, and I'm pretty sure is probably going to be out for the rest of the season. At least, I would assume so with that collarbone injury. But he had 45 yards with 1 touchdown through the first 2 games. Dontavian Wicks has started to make some plays out there too. We've also seen Savion Williams a little bit, and I think once Christian Watson comes back, he'll also be involved. But I think probably the biggest shock of this entire season so far has been Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft through 2 games, 8 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, a majority of those did come in this past week where he had 124 total yards and a touchdown. But based off what I saw last night, and even in some ways in week 1, it kind of feels like Tucker Kraft is becoming the safety blanket for Jordan Love. I thought that was going to be Matthew Golden, and it still very well could end up being. But it feels like Tucker Kraft is really becoming this reliable guy that this Packers team believes in, and Jordan Love, most importantly, also believes in. The tight end room for this Packers team has been fine the past couple years, but it hasn't had a singular guy break out, becoming that big, key, reliable target for Jordan Love. I believe that this is a year where Tucker Kraft could very well end up becoming that reliable target. I'm not going to say he's going to have 1,000 yards with 16 touchdowns or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kraft ends the season with like 50 or 60 catches for, 700, 800 yards and multiple touchdowns. I think that would be a really good year for Tucker Kraft. You also throw in Luke Musgraves here and there, and he'll get some playing time as well. Again, I do expect Matthew Golden to eventually become one of the top targets for this team, which will take away from Tucker Kraft, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Tucker Kraft as a huge instrumental part of this offense. And then let's talk about the offensive line. Now, we haven't seen a whole bunch from Zach Tom. He's only played, I think, like 30 snaps. Same thing with Aaron Banks. So we really haven't gotten to see the full experience of this offensive line. But so far, through 2 weeks, Jordan Love has only been sacked a total of 2 times. The pressure really hasn't been on him too much. Jordan Love has been also spectacular. We'll talk about him here in just a little bit. But in terms of this offensive line, they're creating gaps for Josh Jacobs to run through. They're protecting Jordan Love, giving him time to roll out and make some plays. This offensive line, especially when they fully get healthy with Zach Tom, Aaron Banks, and everyone 100%, this offensive line heading into the season was already one of the best units out there, but as we have gotten through 2 weeks, we've also been able to see some of the depth here too, and this offensive line has been really freaking good, so I am very excited about this offensive line. Now let's have the conversation about Jordan Love. So far, it's just been 2 games, but he has a completion percentage of 66% with 480 yards, averaging 9.1 yards per throw, 4 touchdowns, and has only again been sacked twice. He currently has a QBR of 76.7 and a rating on ESPN of 120.0. Again, I do want to emphasize, this is only 2 weeks in the NFL season, but against high-level competition versus the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions, Jordan Love has been, simply put, very good. He hasn't necessarily had to become a gunslinger. There have been a lot of things wide open for him, and he has been taking them, the checkdowns, using his legs when he needs to, extending plays when he needs to. Something about Jordan Love that has sort of become the critique of his, or the criticism of his, is that at times Jordan Love sort of becomes, he likes to be Superman occasionally. He likes to try to make the super tight window throws, and sometimes turnovers end up being a real deal issue for him. And last year, at one point, it was an issue. But then in the late stretch of 2024, he started to correct that issue, and he did not have many turnovers towards the back end of the stretch there. And as we've gotten into this season, he really has not been putting the ball in harm's way very often. I mean, he has been making a ton of high-level throws, making the right plays over and over and over again. And when there's something available downfield, he surely can take it. He's got an incredible arm. It looks like the game is starting to slow down for him. His pocket presence is improving. This is the progression we've all wanted to see from Jordan Love. And at least through 2 weeks of the season, he has looked like a very, very, very capable quarterback. Capable enough quarterback to get his team to where we think they can ultimately go. Again, I'm not projecting them to win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to say they're going to win it. But I will tell you right now, if Jordan Love continues this level of play, he is good enough to be a Super Bowl level quarterback. And I don't say that lightly. I only think there's a handful of quarterbacks that are of the Super Bowl level quarterbacks. You're talking about him being in the same room as a Burrow, Allen, Lamar, Mahomes. I would even throw a CJ Stroud, a Jaden Daniels, a Matthew Stafford. I also believe a guy like maybe Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, and probably Jared Goff as well, I think you can start to throw a guy like Jordan Love's name into that hat and saying he's of the caliber of being good enough to get his team to a Super Bowl. Again, there's only maybe 15 quarterbacks currently in the league that I 100% believe can take their team to a Super Bowl, and Jordan Love is starting to make a strong case to be considered as one of those guys. So far to his young career, he's been great. He's won playoff games. We're now entering into what should become the prime of his career, and he's starting to really look like he's getting in a flow. So I'm very excited about that. I think he's playing great football right now. But again, it's not just the offense, it's also the defense. Defensively speaking, they have held their opponents to less than 20 in back-to-back games. Lions only scored 13, but even then, they really only scored like 6 because they had that crazy touchdown catch to Isaac Tesla, which was just bonkers. And the same story kind of follows here with the Washington Commanders. This Packers defense held them to 3 total points through 3 quarters. They got 15 towards the end there, but that was just because Green Bay was playing prevent defense and making them, dime their way down the field. And give credit to Jaden Daniels, he made some plays, but on the day, the defense only gave up 230 total yards on the day. They forced the Commanders 5 of 16 on 3rd down, 1 of 3 in 4th down, 4 punts. They also had 4 sacks on the day. And then versus the Detroit Lions, 246 total yards, 5 of 15 on 3rd down, 3 punts, gave up 4 sacks, and they had an interception on the day. This defense has just been completely balling. Now, coming into the season, my biggest concern for this unit, especially after they made the Micah Parsons trade, I was worried about the corners. I was worried about Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard, Nate Hobbs, all of those guys. I was very, very concerned about this unit. I had no questions about the defensive line. I thought Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper, Isaiah McDuffie, I thought those linebackers were going to really have a good year. I love their safeties, Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney. But I have been very concerned about those cornerbacks. Could they hold up on an island? And well, through 2 weeks versus Terry McLaurin, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Deebo Samuel, so far, they've answered the call. Versus the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra was 4 for 45. Jamison Williams was 4 catches for 23 yards. Against the Commanders, Terry McLaurin had 5 catches for 48 yards. Deebo Samuel had 7 catches for 44 yards. A lot of that production for both the Lions and the Washington Commanders came pretty late in the 4th quarter. They've held up for the most part, and when you look at PFF, the grades for those corners have been pretty solid. Evan Williams has been a revelation for them at safety. He's just an incredible ball-hawking safety. Pair that up with Xavier McKinney, who you can literally say the exact same thing about. You now have a defensive line that is causing mayhem on the quarterback. Micah Parsons has been that consistent go-to pass rusher, and so far this season, he has been an absolute maniac on fire. He's been good as a run stuffer, excellent against the pass, and even though maybe he's not getting to the quarterback every single play, his presence alone is making it possible for guys like Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary to have more one-on-ones and have more opportunities to make bigger plays. Micah Parsons is eating a lot of the double teams. He's eating up a lot of, when he does get singled, he's beating them pretty consistently. So teams are forcing him to send the line his way. And that's opening up so much more for the rest of these guys, that this team is one of the best teams currently at getting after the quarterback, and it's because in large part of how damn good Micah Parsons is. You pair that with linebackers that are athletic, willing to get downhill, decent enough in coverage, and you have a really excellent front seven that can not only get after the quarterback, but also pretty much really well stuff the run. You also now pair that with safeties that can get interceptions and turnovers, pair that with corners that are playing well in coverage, and an offense that can score points, and all of a sudden you're looking at a team that from top to bottom is pretty damn complete. I've been very impressed with this defense. Last night against the Washington Commanders, they were just able to rush for, stick in zone coverage, make life brutal for Jaden Daniels out there. There was nothing open downfield. Every single throw that he was having to make was either underneath or a super tight window throw. Hardly anything deep was open. And the same story can also be said about the Detroit Lions. Yes, the Lions were able to kind of drive down the field, but it was a very difficult time. It was a lot of 3rd downs. It was a lot of, small gains. Occasionally they would get a big one, but this defense for the most part has been able to limit the chunk plays and really force teams to drive the entire length of the field. And it's been very impressive from this Packers defense. I liked what I saw from them last year, but it was clear that they were missing a piece somewhere. Maybe it was a lockdown corner. Maybe it was a insanely good pass rusher, but they were missing that guy. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to find those guys. And heading into the season, You get the chance to get Micah Parsons, and they make the move, and my God, has it been an incredible decision for this defense so far. But now we look at the rest of the schedule for the Green Bay Packers, and while it's not the easiest schedule the rest of the way, I think there's a legitimate possibility this team ends up winning the NFC North. Next week, you got the Cleveland Browns, then you have the massive game in Dallas. I expect Micah Parsons to go absolutely nuts here. Then you get your bye week, a pretty early bye week, which is unfortunate, but you get Cincinnati, Arizona, Pittsburgh, Carolina, 4 very winnable games. Then you got the Philadelphia Eagles. This is going to be the game, assuming this Packers team keeps up this level of play through that Week 10 matchup. That Philadelphia game is going to tell us a lot about this team. It's going to be at home in Green Bay with a very good Philadelphia team that at that stage, we might be talking about 2 of the top teams in the NFC. If you beat Philadelphia, they might be the favorites to win it all. If you lose to them, but keep it close, we're still looking pretty good. But if you get blown out, that changes the storyline completely about your team. That Philadelphia game in Week 10 looks like a huge matchup. But after the Philadelphia Eagles, the New York Giants, the Minnesota Vikings, Detroit, Chicago, Denver, Chicago, Baltimore, Minnesota, it does get pretty difficult from Week 12 to Week 18. However, if you handle your business versus your divisional rivals, like they did in Week 1 versus Detroit, like what they hope to do to Minnesota down the stretch here, these are winnable games. Another game to keep an eye on here, that Week 17 matchup versus Baltimore, that might be a sneak peek at the Super Bowl depending on where things are at that stage. Both these teams look very good. So this Packers schedule, like, it's not that difficult. It does get harder down the stretch, but once you get up to like Week 9, yes, Pittsburgh, Cincy, Arizona, those games won't be easy, but they're winnable games that this Packers team will be favored in. Then they get Philadelphia, and if they win that game, this Packers team is looking like they might have a really good magical season. But if you lose, keep it respectable, and I think we'll still think very highly of you. This schedule is not the hardest schedule in the world. They should be able to manage it, navigate it a certain way. And I'm looking at this team and I'm seeing 12, 13 wins is probably a pretty real possibility, as long as you don't stumble along the way versus some bad teams like Carolina, Giants, Chicago, so on and so forth. If you handle your business in those games, this Packers team should be looking pretty good. So all in all, I look at this Packers team. I think they have the offense. I believe they have the defense now. They have the pass rushers, the stars. The only thing that looks like could end up kind of hindering this team could be the injury bug. So far, they have had a number of injuries on this team. Jaden Reed with the collarbone injury, Zach Tom, Aaron Banks. Let's hope those guys can get healthy. Nate Hobbs too. If those guys can get healthy and end up playing for the rest of the season, this team could be in for a big one. They look like legitimate contenders on the field so far. I've been very impressed with this team. They look very well coached. They look excited. They look motivated. I think this Packers team is going to be in for an awesome year. But you let me know in the comment section below, how many wins will the Green Bay Packers win in 2025? And are they Super Bowl contenders? You let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.